Hello and welcome to Amaranth Thine Art. Today I'm going to be showcasing the new My Favourite Things Ocean Pals stamp set in an underwater scene card. I'm going to start today by stamping out my images with Memento Tuxedo black ink onto some Nina Solar White cardstock. I'm then going to use Copics to colour the images before I move on to the rest of the card. I'm going to put some music on while I colour the images as it does take a little while, and then I'll be back with you shortly. So as you can see, once I've finished colouring the images with the Copic markers, I'm adding some highlights and details using a white gel pen. I love adding these little details just to add a bit more dimension to the characters. Once I've finished colouring the images, I'm then going to use the coordinating dies to cut them out. I will have to use the small dies for the fish and the slightly bigger fish more than once, as I'm using more than one of this image. I'm then going to use my craft knife just to cut out some of the white area in between the tentacles of the octopus. As this is going to be one of the main focal points of the image, I want to make sure that some of that background of the ocean comes through those tentacles. This is an optional thing. For me, it's a personal taste. I prefer less white on my images, so I just use my knife to cut out those extra bits that I don't want to be shown on my card. Once I've done this, I then cut out a square piece of card using the wonky stitched stacks dynamic set by My Favourite Things, and I used the largest square, and this is going to sit on the back of my 6x6 card base. I'm now going to work on the background, and before I put the ocean in, I'm going to add some plants using the My Favourite Things Limelight die and the Simon Says Stamp Lime die, and I'm going to use a combination of these plants from the Exquisite Ocean stamp set by My Favourite Things. This is another new stamp set, but they work really well together. So I'm using the MFT Limelight stamp first, and then using my Misty to help me position this, because I am going to stamp more than once. And then I'll go in with the Simon Says Stamp Lime just to add a bit more definition. And eventually these will be the background plants, so it doesn't have to be perfect anyway. And as you'll see, I just keep going backwards and forwards, positioning that stamp and lining up where I want those plants to be. For this other plant, I'm using the dark green ink only, and I'll stamp that a couple of times to get a good impression. Now it's time to work on the underwater part of the card. So I've masked off the back panel of my card so that it doesn't cross over that line, and I'm going to blend some Distress Oxide inks across the card in an ombre style to create the illusion of underwater. So I'm starting with the cracked pistachio at the top. I'll blend that out into broken china, and then at the bottom I'll add some faded jeans. This ink is amazing. I use the other distress inks a lot, but these ones are something else. They blend amazing on most cardstocks, and they give it a really nice finish. They're like a matte chalky finish, but they don't feel chalky to the touch. But they just blend really well. You can layer them. You can do a lot with them like the original distress inks. So if you haven't got these, I highly recommend them. So you will see that I spend quite a bit of time doing this. I like to go backwards and forwards, blending the colours together and getting rid of harsh lines, adding more colour in, and just making sure that I get the nice finish that I want. You'll also notice that I'm going over the plants that were created earlier with the darkest blue. They will fade into the background, they'll look like they're more in the distance, and then we'll stamp over these afterwards with some more plants to create some dimension and definition, just to give it that bit more interest. If you don't want these colours to be so bright and vibrant, you can spritz them with water, and that's when the oxidized texture comes out. For me, I love the brightness of these colours, so I will be flicking it with water later on, but I am going to primarily keep the colours that you see now. Once I've got the blend that I want, I'm then going to add those forefront plants back into the card. So for this, I'm going to use the peeled paint Distress Oxide inks, as you can layer them, and I'm going to use the seaweedy like plant to stamp around the card at all different angles to create the illusion that there's seaweed and plants at the front of the card. I'm just layering these in different positions, and then you'll see that it creates a really nice effect. Once it's all done, we can then go ahead and remove that masking tape to reveal the really nice panel on the front of our card. It gives a really nice finish with those Distress Oxide inks. So I'm going to set that aside to dry, and I'm going to use the same Distress Oxide colours with the cracked pistachio, the broken china and the faded jeans on the panel I cut out earlier using the wonky stitch stacks dies, and this will then go onto the front of our card base and make sure that it all blends together nicely. So I will fast forward this bit because you've just seen me blend the other card, and we'll skip to the next bit. So once I've got my two panels done, you can see that they both match now. I'm going to flick some droplets of water across there to create some underwater bubbles. So I'm going to just add some of those drops on, and then you can see the oxidization happen when you drop those droplets on. It just looks fantastic. I could watch this all day long. And then I'm going to pick up those water droplets using some kitchen towel, and then you'll see the different colours that you get on that background. It creates some really nice bubbly effects across those panels. So once I've finished with the water, I'm then going to dry these panels thoroughly with my heat tool. You can leave it to dry on its own, but as these are a combination of dye and pigment inks, they do take longer to dry than regular distress inks. So as I'm going to be doing some heat embossing, I'm going to dry these thoroughly to make sure the embossing powder only goes where I want it to. I'm going to be adding my sentiment into the bottom left corner of our cutout panel. So I've used my anti-static tool, and I'm just going to check to see if that embossing powder sticks to the background. And as you can see, now the ink's completely dry, it won't stick to anywhere other than where I stamped my sentiment. So I'm using some perfect medium embossing ink from Ranger just to stamp that sentiment, and this is the happy birthday sentiment from the Ocean Pals stamp set. I'm using some Hero Arts white embossing powder to create a really nice crisp sentiment on that dark background. It just makes it pop. So then we're ready to heat it. So I'm going to heat it from the front and the back just to make sure that that panel stays as flat as possible. As you can see, it's a really nice crisp white onto that blue background. So now I'm going to adhere my panel, my small panel, onto the card base using some 3D foam tape just to give it a bit more dimension, and then we're going to start to add in the Ocean Pals critters. So I'm going to arrange where I want them to sit before I adhere them down to make sure I get an arrangement that I like. And I'm adding the smaller fish behind the bigger kind of creatures to give it a bit more dimension so it looks like they're kind of swimming in the background. I really love these critters. They're just so cute and adorable. I love them. So I'm going to adhere the shark, the octopus and one of the large fish with some 3D foam tape, and then I'll adhere the rest of the little fish with some double-sided sticky tape so that they're kind of in the background. To add some more interest and some more bubbles, I'm going to use one of my favourite elements, and that is the Pretty Pink Posh water droplets. And I'm using the large and the smaller ones and arranging them across the card to create some bigger bubbles coming out from some of the creatures that are swimming around. And once I've got them in a place that I like them, I'm just going to use a small amount of glossy accents to stick them to the card. Once I've done that, and then add in more bubbles, because I love bubbles, to the card with some glossy accents, and I'm adding some really tiny dots from the small fish just to give it a bit more interest. It gives a really nice shine on the card. I'm also going to add the glossy accents to all the eyes of the creatures just to make them stand out a bit more. You can also find this card over on the MFT guest blog where I am featured with this card today. I'll leave a link to that in the description box below. But that finishes the card for today, so I hope you liked it. I'm going to show you some close-up images of the final card. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give me a like and a comment if you did. Don't forget to subscribe to see more, and I'll be back next time with another video. Thanks for watching. Bye.